And my idea, when I heard that this greater Carlisle project was happening, they wanted to collect stories over what is significant in the community, or what best represents our community, or what is it about our community that we want to hang on to, and what changes do we see for the future, but what needs to be retained. And so Lindsay went to like churches, she went to businesses, so it was much wider than Claremont. But when I heard her give her spiel, I thought, this is a fantastic, Claremont is over 175 years old, if I have that number right. And it has to have influenced a lot of people growing up. I heard originally it was a poorhouse.
Yeah.
And so on. So that's kind of what I would like to see the conversation go toward. And here we have three of the, I don't even want to think about adding up all the years that you all represent, but a lot.
A lot.
Absolutely. Well, Blaine, you might want to start, since you have been here since your father was the administrator and you were a young man, young teenager probably when you were.
Well, first of all, my father was here as the superintendent then, not administrator, for 42 years. Now, he started out as a farmer and gardener, and whenever, I forget the gentleman's name, retired as superintendent, they moved him up. So then we moved in here. There was a mansion, and I happened to be 5 years old. I better not tell the year. No, it was 1944. I moved in here. Me and my two sisters, we were pretty much raised here at the home.
Now because I remember the day I preached at your church, we had a little conversation, and you surprised me by saying what you did here. So give us an idea of what you did, and what the purpose, what the home was like then.
Well, like I said, I lived here till I got married, and one of the farmers quit. And Dad asked me if I was interested in working on the farm. So that's how I got back at the home as a farmer myself. And then later on, he made me the farm manager, which I was over 2 other employees, plus the patients that helped on the farm. They did a lot of the labor work.
So what'd you do with the food that was raised?
Boy, it was all used here. It was, the home was self-supporting pretty much.
Yes.
They raised, well, you can see there's a hog pen, they raised chickens.
And that's the building across the street, the existing.
And we killed 50 hogs every winter, cured the meat, and they kept it over the summer so they had meat. Yep, and the only thing they had to buy then was like the produce, cereals and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was as far as the meals, potatoes. We had 10 acres of potatoes that they raised, and
Corn.
oh yeah, all the different crops in the garden.
So,
Wow.
I've heard people say it was called the poorhouse.
There were residents that were brought here when they were young that weren't possibly, and I use this loosely, right in the terms of the public, and this is where they ended up coming.
We also had young girls that were pregnant, and they came here to live until they had their babies. And when I started in the early 70s as a nurse, I worked with an aide that had been here, gave birth to her child, and then just stayed here as an employee. We had a lot of gentlemen, like Blaine said, that worked here, and they worked in the fields, they took care of the animals, and they were very proud of their work, and it kept them busy. We also had ladies that baked and sewed, and in the evenings they would sit out on the porch and snap beans and hull strawberries. And they were very, this was before, I don't know how to explain it. This was before they were not allowed to work. The residents were not allowed to work. And this was in fact a home. It was not a nursing home. It was a home. It was more like college dormitories. Everybody had their purpose. Everybody had a thing to do. I've also told a lot of the young girls, like when I started, I was in 3 to 11 shift. 10 o'clock at night, loved it. They would bring around sticky buns that they made for breakfast tomorrow. Here, Carol, you work so hard, have a sticky bun, cup of coffee. So I would go home at 11 o'clock at night, and the guys would be sitting out on the front porch with the lights on playing poker. In the evenings, 8, 9 o'clock at night, we would take 3 or 4 guys, jump in our cars, run them up to Massey's. We would get ice cream, we would come back. They would sit out on the porch and visit. And one of the things that I found hard as a young nurse when I came here was in nursing school, they always tell you, do not get involved with your residents. Do not, don't become attached to them. Well, you have to. You had to. And it was like everybody that worked here had a whole bunch of grandparents that they would come and visit every day. When I was on 3 to 11, I lived in Carlisle. On my nights off, it was not uncommon for me to come over and just to visit a little bit. You're afraid you're going to miss something. Yeah, I mean, really, it was a lot of fun, We used to take people home. We would take them to parades. We would go to
Absolutely.
fairs
My gosh.
with
and
them.
How about the hay rides? We
Yeah.
would put oh my gosh, we would never be allowed to do that now. We would have this big flatbed truck that had a lift gate on it, and we would put residents in their wheelchairs in this, and then we would stack bales of
Bales
hay
around
around them to keep them still, and then we would all hold on like heck to them, and Blaine would drive us, and we'd go all over heck.
But what
We
was
had
neat about
fun.
that too,
It was
what was
for
neat about
years.
that too was, we would do it before it got too dark, and they would tell us all about our community. Now, we've all grown up around here, but there was such a wealth of information, oh, that's where so-and-so lived. He used to be the attorney that, did this, and, oh, there's old Dr. So-and-so's house, and he used to do this,
And we never worried
No.
about anything happening,
No.
like
No.
they do now. It was just we were out to have fun with the residents, and we
Right.
did. And even when I started in '83, they were still cooking. The
Mm-hmm.
residents of the activity department would make vegetable soup. They chop up their own vegetables, and they would sell it to everybody, and they would have
Okay, here's a
luncheons.
question. If the community back then, if the community didn't have Claremont, where would all those people have gone?
Oh my!
I don't know, because a lot of the people that were here couldn't read and write.
Their families didn't want them.
There was
Really?
back then, Chaplain, there was no supporting other organizations. Like now you have, Office of Aging, you have,
Housing Authority.
CPART, you have Housing Authority. Then, I'm not sure what would have happened. I honestly don't know where
I
they
mean, we
lived.
had residents. From personal experience, Charlie
Right,
his family didn't want him.
Right.
He was.
And he come in here, he was young.
yeah.
young.
And he was
Yes.
born with mental,
Yeah,
disabilities,
he was
and
here.
he was very low functioning, but, and he would just trail after these guys, the guys that worked with the cows or the farm. Not that, he would help as he could, but they were his role models.
I took him to his
and-
father's funeral, and his family still didn't want anything to do with him. But years later, he sat in the back of the room with me.
Mhm.
So in all honesty, I don't know.
Right,
That's quite a heritage to be,
know.
there, Andrew's gonna come in a minute and tell about having 3 relatives in this, at Claremont, and how unmistakably unique the care that each one of them got over a period of many, many years. But the one thing that was always consistent here at Claremont is that, and it's kind of what you were getting at, Carol, is that this was more than a job. And it was a part of the community. You took care of the residents. It was a mutual thing. They, you provided something to them, they provided something to the
right.
community.
And it wasn't just us 3.
No.
There's so many people and and there is many that still work here too, that have been here for the longevity. And we've talked about this before, and I think that's something that really bothers me. overall, not just the county home, but overall, just in general, in the work field today, there's no longevity. There's just no longevity. People, you know, we came here, of course, we came looking for a job, but we liked our positions, we liked what we did. The county's been very good to all of us. So we have the longevity, and now I'm working with young aides and nurses that are here 1, 2, 3 years and gone. You know, they go someplace else. They go, not that they're not good employees, I'm not saying that, it's just there's no longevity anymore. They just don't stay. So,
It's
you know,
almost as if we're like the residents, we came here at a young age, and we stayed. You
and
know?
we have residents here that used to work here. So now they're residents. And I must say, with those residents, it's like we have a kindred spirit. You know, I mean, like, they're our friends. They're not residents here.
We still
They're
have
friends
side
that
by
we
side.
worked with for years, you know, and I think all three of us benefited from those that went before us. I'm an LPN, that's 1 year of school. You do your best job you can do. 90% of what I've done over the years or learned, it's from the nurses that worked here, the doctors that worked here. I always say the last true nurse I worked for was Mrs. Siders. She was a supervisor, and when you look up the word nurse, there she is. Her white starch cap, her white starch dress, the white stockings, the navy blue sweater, walked very upright and very proud, and a super nurse. And we've learned so much from them that we're trying to pass that on, and the big difference I can see is the longevity's just not there. Plus, nursing homes now are not homes, they're institutions. And I don't think it's anything that staff here has done, I think it's just the way medicine is progressing.
You're absolutely
Is it good or bad? Who knows? But I'll tell you this, it's not the home that we worked in.
Well, I was out, sometimes I go out with Helen to represent Claremont at these different gatherings, 55 and over gatherings or whatever. We get a little booth and we sit there and hand out Claremont brochures.
Sure.
And one time this lady, I mean like last year, this lady came up and she found out I was a chaplain. She threw her arms around me and she said, "Thank you, chaplain, for giving me my husband." And I said, "What?" Like, you mean you guys met here? Is what I
Yeah.
thought.
Right.
And she said, "No, we didn't meet here, but my husband, when he was 8 years old, he had no place to go, no families, and Claremont raised him. And we met one day and we married, and that was 63 years ago. So thank you."
Oh,
Oh, I wonder
And I
what
bet,
that was.
and I
Who
bet
that
that
was.
story,
Oh,
I bet that story could be duplicated 100 times.
Yeah.
no, I think Claremont is a wonderful place.
Absolutely. I
And
don't
through-
think any of us
traditionally
would have
through all the
stayed.
years, you know.
Right.
And I think that without this being here, there would have been a lot of people homeless. I don't, if homeless even was a term back then, I'm not really sure.
Or maybe
you know,
they may not even have survived.
survived, exactly, you know.
I know when I started, we used to have, you know, you're talking about the guys working the farm and stuff. We used to have ladies that worked here as CNAs. Some of them have passed not too awful long ago. I can remember when Women's Home Building, before the Tower Building, June Parks used to be the supervisor in there. And she had her nurses and her aides, and then they also have 3 residents. And they would go around and help with whatever needed to be done. And back then, if you have somebody that wasn't doing well, or was depressed, or just had a bad day and was crying, they would let the nurse know, and we would find other residents to go in and sit with them, just to hold their hand, to tell them a story, to talk to them, to give them a hug, whatever, you know. And now so much of that's gone, you know. Now with all the regulations, state and federal, and you can only do this, and the worst thing I think ever came out of that was that the residents couldn't work here anymore. They lost their dignity when they couldn't work anymore. That's when they become residents. They didn't live here, they were a resident here. They
Yeah.
couldn't,
They
you
couldn't,
know.
they didn't feel like they were giving back.
Right.
Maybe being
We had people that
productive.
would just sit and fold towels,
Yeah.
but they did it for 8
Katie
hours.
worked in the kitchen.
They worked
yeah,
in the
Katie
kitchen.
Reynolds.
We had
Katie
a lot of
kitchen.
people that sewed for us, the ladies, would fix the hems, you know, the guys would come in from the barn with a rip in their pants. We would call one of the ladies and they would hem it for them. We had ladies that crocheted, that made shawls for people. But once they were no longer allowed to physically work here, they became residents. They didn't just live here, they were residents.
Okay, I've got a question, then we'll go around to each. If you could think of one thing you're most proud of, either like your experience here, or if you thought, what's the one thing about Claremont that not only like was the beacon light in the past and thinking about the future? What is it? Can you think of one thing that where you think that Claremont, like you're either most proud of or think that it still today can contribute to the community?
Oh my.
That's a tough one.
Blaine, you want? I mean, there's probably so many, and I'll think
Yeah.
of them later, you know. But if there's one thing that I'm most proud of,
Yeah,
of Claremont,
yeah.
that
One thing you'd like to know, let everybody sort of know about that. Here's the history. Here's what we're done. Here's our place.
that we have under our roof many, many, many people throughout the ages, and I don't know if this is really answering your question, that throughout the years that have worked their whole life really hard, that have raised families, that have worked maybe 2 or 3 jobs trying to make ends meet, and this is what it comes down to now, us, and that we can open our doors and say, come home, come on in, you've worked hard your whole life, now let us help you. And I'm thinking we're doing that for the most part, at least I hope we are. Maybe that we can open our doors and be that last home for people that have nowhere else to go. You know, and truly, I mean, these private sectors are very pricey. I'm sure they're beautiful.
Well, we are too. I mean,
Well,
really,
we
when
are,
you look
but-
at it, any nursing home or long-term care place or whatever, it's, of course, we all know it, it's ridiculous,
It
the
is.
prices anymore. Is it justified or not? I certainly don't know, but I do know it's a big concern for everybody. And I think that you have to, I think the thing for me is, and I think it's also for all of us that have been here for a while, we try our best to make it that home again. It'll never be what it was, it'll never be. But it's, when you walk by, you get a hug, you give a kiss, you shake a hand, you make fun in a teasing way, you know, like, you interact like you would at home with your grandparents, with your uncles, it's not, we try to make it so it's not sterile. You know what I mean? You want it to be the home. You want it to be some place that they feel relaxed.
Comfortable, safe.
That's it. That's the word right there. You want them to be comfortable? Yes, yeah. And another thing too, it's like a young, well, when I was young, I mean, I was right out of nursing school, and I was fortunate enough to work with a group of CNAs that were older at the time. No, I mean, I probably thought they were old, but they were probably only in their 40s. But we had a resident one time that was just having a bad day, so being the new nurse, I'm like, oh, I'll go give him a pill to take care of that. And the one CNA said to me, don't, just stop, don't be so fast to put a pill in her mouth. And she brought him up to the desk, they had some coffee together, and they talked, and they did their work, and she was going on, and you could just see her de-escalate, and then after a while, she started to yawn, and Charlotte said, come on, let's go back and go to bed. So, I mean, we were fortunate enough that we learned so much that I feel it's up to us to pass that on. And I just, you know, like I said, if it wouldn't be a good place, I don't think any of us would have lasted as long as we did, really. So,
No, it's,
Well, what about, Mary, Marianne, you and I have talked about this parking lot out here.
I'm
What's that all about?
terrified of that, it's being paved more and more over the graveyard, and I'm really hopeful. There's a graveyard in the back of our facility that isn't well marked. Blaine remembers it when he was here and walked me through it one day and kind of said this was the perimeter of it. And then Tim and I walked through it, and we can see the hills and where maybe somebody is buried. There's only a few markers left out there. I really don't know the number of people that are buried back there, but it's quite a few, I'm imagining, because it's a pauper's grave. We had the old hospital, this tower the red brick building out here that used to be a hospital in its day. people had died of consumption and were buried, and I'm assuming they must have been buried back here. And that's all at the Historical Society. It can be
Sure, it'd be nice
researched.
if somebody picked the ball up on that.
And I tried, we
Yeah.
tried, and we were stopped because they didn't want maybe me as the bus driver to pursue that anymore, so I had to stop, and that came from higher up. And that's where I'm gonna stop that. But I'm really worried that, that's gonna be forgotten back there.
Yeah.
And that
And
people are
it's
gonna,
shrinking.
and shrinking, and gosh, God forbid, has any of it already started to creep into,
Yeah,
into the
been
graveyard,
encroached upon.
approach it, exactly. I would really, 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 before my life is over, love to be able to see that honored as it should be. And even if, God forbid, years from now, this is not a Claremont, not a county facility anymore, but that will always, always, always be there as the final resting place for people that have had nowhere else, once
Yep.
again,
Right.
had nobody else to
Mm-hmm.
visit them, in life, and now they have nobody to visit them in death. And I think that they deserve to, I think we deserve to have that looked at and preserved. I really,
Mhm.
it's a graveyard. It
Yeah, I
needs to
agree.
be, it needs to
Somebody
be
told
looked
me a
into that.
story one time, that not only residents from Claremont will be buried there, but like if there was a transient
Yes.
person.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
And-
or
Fell off the train.
somebody got killed,
Anybody that passed that
in the
didn't have
county?
money.
that didn't have any money.
Yep.
Either the county had to bury him or pay to get him buried somewhere else.
Wow, what a legacy.
And they never, the bad part is, they never kept any records
Mm-hmm.
back years ago, like they just would bury him. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, the three brothers is about the only ones that has a monument.
And
The
some of them
the
are
Wheelers.
very, yeah, we saw that, Tim and I
There's
saw
three,
that. And
three brothers.
there's actually somebody famous
And-
buried back there,
and they
Wilhelm
had-
Schimmel.
Yeah, the guy that did
They
the
had-
carvings, the Schimmel carvings in Cumberland County, he's buried in there.
And an unmarked grave, it said. Now, Blaine, you were telling me stories that you remembered when you were you would be burying people, that sometimes you would hit a grave and you'd have to move over a little bit.
Well, yeah, well, there was no vaults or anything used years ago. They just buried them. And there was no markers, so you didn't know. So, yep. In fact, when they tore the fence down around, that's when they made it bigger, so they didn't disturb some of the graves. Yep.
Well, if you had to take a wild guess in your lifetime while you were here burying people, how many did you bury?
Oh, I have no idea. I know John Gleim started digging the graves for Dad, but from up Westminster.
Mhm.
Yeah, we dug some by hand years ago.
And the last one was buried back in the 80s, early 80s,
I don't
maybe?
know.
See, yeah, it's a
I think
shame.
that was
Yeah, I don't remember.
one of the wheel,
Yeah.
Snowball, or one, I don't know which one of them was the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we may never know, unfortunately, who's all buried back there, but we can at least consider it what it is.
Yeah, it doesn't
you
matter,
know?
their souls
Yeah,
buried
Exactly,
there, period.
exactly. And we just need to make sure that there isn't ever a parking lot over top of them. And I see that around Carlisle, things that are going by the wayside. They're knocking down old stone homes to make room for warehouses and parking lots. And it seems like almost open space doesn't matter sometimes anymore. And,
But this is more than open space, this
it's
is,
just, yeah, no,
yeah,
I
like
just,
you said,
but
there's
you know,
souls in
it's,
there, you're
I
right.
just hope that that they don't look at that and think, oh, we need more parking.
yeah, you're right,
No,
absolutely, I
don't think
agree,
they'll ever
Mary.
do that.
I hope not, but I don't know. No, so I don't know how to get that ball rolling, and I don't know if the Historical Society could help out. I don't know.
Hint,
Wink,
hint,
wink.
we're hoping, we're hoping.
Wink, wink, nod, nod. So just to clarify, you think the records are lost, or there never were any records?
I don't think there was any records. My dad, when he was here, he had a record of the ones that was buried probably while he was here. But before that,
Well, now, I have to be honest, when I was at the Historical Society researching the history of Claremont, I came across burial records.
oh yeah.
And but it just says Pauper's grave, Pauper. It doesn't necessarily designate county home, or at least that was what, and at least that's what I was, maybe I wasn't researching the right thing, but I did, and it looked like that there were even young children buried back
Yeah.
there. It just said like consumption, died of consumption, died, lots of died of consumption. And so, but it just kept saying Pulper's grave, Pulper's grave.
Right.
So I'm not really sure if that's where they were exactly buried, or the other Pulper's grave that are graves that are here in graveyards that are here in Carlisle. But yeah, it's just.
What would if somebody said to you, what's your favorite story about Claremont? What would you say?
I've got quite a few. I don't know. Some are racier than others.
Oh, maybe our ratings will go up if
Oh
we
my
heard some of those.
We had a resident that lived in the men's home building, which is no longer owned by the county, but it's still here, the red brick building. And when I started working here, I was probably 19 years old. And I worked 3 to 11, brand new nurse, didn't even have my license yet. Worked 3 to 11. We used to do the autoclaving in the basement of that building. And the nurse that worked that evening on 3 to 11 was the one that did that care. So I'm, young nurse, and I'm going down in this basement to get this stuff out. And I'm doing my job, and all of a sudden I felt what I thought was a gun in the middle of my back. And I just almost had a heart attack. And then I heard a laugh and giggle and turned around. It was one of the residents, and he was a little mentally impaired, but he wanted to tell me that I will be here, and if there's any bad guys, I will take care of them. It was not a gun. It was a stick that he had whittled out. But in the dusk, in the middle of your back, in the basement, it sure felt like a gun. But in his mind, he was taking care of me. He was taking care of me, but he almost gave me a heart attack. And I was pregnant when I worked here too. And we used to have a friend that lived here, Mo, and his famous line is, "Be careful or you're gonna wake up dead." And he used to come around every day that I worked, every day, to check on me, to tell me that Blaine had a tractor in the barn, and if I had to go to the doctor, but he meant hospital, to let them know, because there's always gas in that tractor.
Oh.
So, in his way, he would come around all the time
Everybody
and
looking out
check,
for
yeah.
everybody.
But like I said, it was a home then. They took care of us, we took care of them. So,
Mine used to be, I used to take the residents fishing, and I would take them fishing, and they, the guys, we would get the fishing worms, and I would put them on the hook. I had to learn how to do all of this, by the way. And we would take them fishing, and I would take them fishing, they would catch sunnies usually, but they wanted to eat them. So I would go, and we had to bring everything home with us in a bucket, and I would bring them home, and then I would go to the grocery store and buy fish, and we would have a fish fry. But they never knew that they weren't eating their own fish, because it was very difficult to clean a sunny, and get a meal out of a sunny.
Oh, Mary Ann.
Please forgive me. But they were so happy they were eating their fish.
That is a great story.
Blaine, you must have many.
Well, I a lot of memories, and I guess Mo was the favorite as far as the patients. Everything was Wayne. He didn't call me Blaine.
no,
Everything
it
was Wayne.
Yeah.
Huh.
And he'd tell some wild stories about down at the barn and the cows and
He was
whatever,
Yeah.
and he was really a good worker, and he'd come up for lunch and be back in a half an hour,
Yep.
back ready to go to work.
He loved it.
He loved it down the
Oh,
barn,
he
and
just
he
loved
was
that.
I guess, well, he fell and broke his hip. Then he couldn't come down anymore, but once they stopped him coming down there, he went downhill
Yeah, you
fast.
could just
Sure
see
did.
the downturn. He was just,
Yeah.
and so many of, when they came across and said that nobody could work, and it wasn't a county home rule.
Yeah.
It was, higher up from the government and stuff. They couldn't work anymore. You could almost see the despair just setting in. The sense of
Yeah.
worth was just zoom. It just dropped. They would get up in the morning, and if you work 7 to 3, a lot of times we get here, and they were out working before we ever got here. They were up and showered and dressed and doing their thing.
Well, then when they were cooking the soups and making all the food and stuff, they would never, and I know that times have changed, but they would never be allowed to use a sharp knife now.
Right.
And peel potatoes and cut their vegetables up. That would never be allowed. It would never be allowed to have hay rides again, just with bales
Right.
of
Couldn't
hay to
even
hold
have
them
in the
still.
kitchen, because it had to be some kind of a
No
safety,
way.
something, I'm
And
sure.
certainly not walking off the property across the street.
Right,
You know?
right.
No, it has time, but that's, the times have changed. You know,
Yes.
everybody is so afraid of being sued anymore, it seems
Mhm.
like that. And everybody is so focused on something going wrong. Back then, we didn't even think about it and nothing went wrong. You know, we were just out to have fun with, and
A lot of
Yeah.
people, when they were admitted here years and years ago, were very despondent because, like you said, they were being admitted to the poorhouse. It was the poorhouse. What will my neighbors think? What will my family think? Everybody will know I have no money. You know, it was almost an embarrassing situation for some folks. But once they got here and they met everybody and they became involved and we started doing things, that kind of, you lost that, you know. It might have been the poorhouse to the community, but it wasn't to us here. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you could tell some of the people when they came in didn't want anybody to know they were here. They didn't care that they were in a nursing home. They didn't mind if they knew that, but they didn't want them to know they were in the poorhouse.
and that's still to this day, I hear residents, they still call this the poorhouse.
I've heard that too.
It's still the poorhouse.
Well, the thing that strikes me, I'm new to Carlisle and I've been here about a year. My wife grew up here. But the stories that you've told today, even though the times have changed, the circumstances under which our residents come here has changed. Many things have changed. But as you talked about the commitment of the staff and taking care of people, and what the residents feel when they're living here. To me, I am amazed as I look around because I still see that same commitment among many, many, many of our staff. And I see the same longevity, not among the younger ones perhaps, but among that certain population. Many people have been here 20, 30, 40 years, I would say. Maybe not 40, but up through 30 in the 30 of years. And so it still makes me wonder that you know, probably Claremont is still offering a valuable service to our community. There's still a place for a county nursing home and rehab center. It still is doing a unique function that maybe other nursing homes aren't doing.
I would hope Cumberland County appreciates what Claremont is and has been throughout 200 years. You know, I really do pray about that, because if Cumberland County doesn't care about the residents or about what we have here, then how can you expect a perfect stranger that just comes in and says this is going to change everything, and we have to make sure, and maybe that's why a lot of us are still here, because we want to make sure that it doesn't go by the wayside, Claremont, you know. And what, you know, maybe I'm still fighting it because I'm afraid of that's what it's going to be. They're going to take it away from residents that are hardworking their entire lives, and this is what it comes down to now. And I don't know if they have other places to go, but we have residents that have been here that go home and choose to come back, you know, and it must say something about what goes on.
We've had doctors in the community, we've had their parents, you know, they bring them here, and they certainly have the choice to go wherever, you know.
Somewhere a lot nicer, as far as aesthetically
Yeah, we're never,
pleasing,
we
you
were
know.
never the prettiest
No.
place to live,
No.
by any means. But to me, I always tell the residents when they say that, I say, well, that's because, you know, we don't want to spend our money on paint, we want to spend it on you. And they just,
Exactly.
you know, laugh and carry on. And one other thing I did want to mention, I forgot. We were talking about it being home and stuff. Now, I know the regulations have changed, but another thing that I saw made a change was when we could no longer call without a big to-do, but we couldn't call the residents Pat or Graham or Mo or Snowball or, you know, Robert. There's a, you know, we're not legally allowed to do that anymore. They have to be Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so. Now, we can get permission to do it, we can care plan it, there's avenues we have to take. Back in the day, you didn't have to worry about any of that stuff. You try to make it a home, and I'm calling you Mr. Shatto, in your own home, So it was just little things like that throughout the years
Well,
that you could
Lord's-
kind of see picking away at the home
The
atmosphere.
Lord's Prayer.
Absolutely,
We used to, Elma, I'm
Every
sorry, last
morning.
name, used to say it every morning.
on the intercom.
And that went by the wayside.
Yep,
You're not allowed to
absolutely.
do that anymore.
Right, right. Yeah, so it's just, I know sometimes you ask us questions, we all kind of like hesitate. It's like Mary Ann said, you think of all this stuff after the fact, But it is things like that, it was little things like that that I could see, starting to chip away at the home feeling. It's, like I said, it's a nursing home now. In my opinion, it's a good nursing home. I always said, if God forbid, if something would happen, if I had to, I would be a resident, I wouldn't change that. The only things that bother me now is the changes that were made that were not made by the county. It came higher up. And I think probably if you talk to anybody in any nursing home or long-term care, probably has very similar stories, and they would tell you the same thing, but.
The state,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Well, and Blair, you can jump in here I don't know if you've done these interviews before, but in terms of the goals, the ideas of this greater Carlisle project, can you think of anything any additional points we would need to hit on or could consider?
No, one of the things that stood out to me is, that sense of community that I think really shone through some of your answers in terms of, the community amongst the residents, amongst the staff, everything together. And I think we covered, amidst that too, that sort of sense of, how things have changed, what you fear about losing. So I think we've hit pretty much a lot of the.
I would love for a couple of generations from now, they're sitting by and they're saying, they're celebrating the 300th anniversary of
Yeah.
Claremont Nursing and
Mhm.
Rehab Center, and that would be a lovely thing. And tell
My
them
fear
stories.
is not knowing. My fear is 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, what are the new mandates gonna be from the state, from the federal government, from whatever, it's just kinda hard. It's kinda hard to hold things together if your hands are tied,
Absolutely.
It's, and that is part of my fear, cause you don't know. You just don't know, what it's gonna, I think all the mandates probably developed out of some horrific thing that happened, and there did need to be changes made, but it's kind of like a lot of these changes that they make are just blanket wide. This is what you're gonna do, period. And we're losing that individual,
Well, I think you might have answered this, but if you can, how would you go about rebuilding that sense of home, that sense of community? Is there a couple small things? Or
Yep,
is it-
there's a couple things I do.
Well, letting residents be involved, maybe.
I get rid of fluorescent
And,
lights to start with. I would put lamps in the rooms, and I know that's probably a fire hazard, so they could keep the lamps on all the time. We used to have lamps in the
Yeah.
rooms. You have to remember, we have a lot of people here with macular degeneration. They don't see well in the daytime as you do. That way we could have the lights on without the glaring heat over it. Put some curtains in the windows. Everybody had, well, not in here, but everybody has the mini blinds. How many of those people live here had them at home? None of them. Just little things like that, just,
Letting
I
the
don't know,
residents
yeah.
participate in more activities as far as, they all love to cook at one time. My gosh, we have some wonderful women here that cooked, and love to cook. Let them help out, let them do
and
stuff.
having said that, I don't want to
You know.
slight our activity staff here, because
No,
they do
no,
that,
no.
they do that. We're not talking about
No.
activities.
No, we're not
This
doing
is,
that
they
at all.
would bring the people into the kitchen, and they would be under the responsibility of whoever the supervisor was in the kitchen, and they would have them washing the lettuce or whatever. Now, our activities people, they do that. I mean, they have programs, and they make cookies, and they do baking like in the wintertime a lot, and they'll have strawberry shortcake parties, and they have dippy egg day and stuff like, and that's fine. We're not talking activities. This was their daily job, just like you come to work here. You know, they had to get up, they had to be in the kitchen by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock to maybe roll up the utensils in a napkin. You know,
Exactly.
or they would go downstairs into the laundry, and they would have their own table, and they would fold all the towels and washcloths that were washed that day. But that was their job. It was not the activity for them, it was their job that they did. They didn't get reimbursed for it via money, but they had a lot of self-pride, a lot of self-esteem. They weren't this little 80, 90-year-old lady that couldn't live by themselves anymore, so they got stuck in a nursing home. They lived here, we helped them when they needed help, but then they got up tomorrow and they went to work. They were off on Sundays, that type of thing.
And even if maybe they couldn't physically do anything anymore, let them still feel as if they're involved with something. Ask their advice. Maybe
Yep.
bring them into the kitchen and say, you know, I'm going to make a meatloaf. What did you use to put in your meat? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Just, I don't know. I don't know at this day, if this time in the stage of things, if you even can anymore, because
Right.
there's so many. I mean, my gosh, what happens if they slip on the floor and break a hip? What happens
Right.
if they cut their finger? You know, what
We
happens?
had ladies, Ruthie and Katie would go around and make the beds for the CNAs. You know, I would go in and get you up and take you to shower you or whatever, and they're coming along behind and they're stripping the linen and throw the dirty linen, and they make the beds for you and stuff. I mean, it just worked.
It was different back then. Maybe
Yes,
it was
it was
different
a
back
lot.
then because I don't want to say the residents were different back then. Maybe because
Yeah,
they were
they were.
younger when they were brought here to live. You know, where now maybe they are older and they really are more incapacitated. It's just a different world now.
You're gonna have that
you
mixture
know.
though, but, excuse me, but that's like I said, you know,
We,
I don't know, they
we
would go
would
in
love
and
to
pick
know how to.
they
you
would go in
know.
and pick their trays up. And Ruthie used to always have, they always wore aprons, and she would have washcloths in her pocket. And if she'd come in and I'm done eating, she'd go to the sink and get it wet and come over and wash my face and hands for me and say, okay, the girls will be in, and then she would take the tray out.
But we
Yeah,
have
I mean,
had
it was
residents
just-
over the
yeah.
years and just recently say, you know, I wish there was something I could do instead of they're sitting on doing a puzzle, you know, and they really would like something to do. They want to feel like they are giving back or just busy, just doing something. And probably the best case would be let them go to laundry and fold stuff. You know, put some gloves on their little hands if they're worried about infection control. Maybe just let them fold towels and wash rags versus
But
going
I
into
don't
the
think
kitchen.
they
I
can
don't
do that
know.
anymore because of liability.
Well, exactly. That's what we're
Yeah.
saying. We don't know how to bring back the home.
Right, we don't
We
know
don't-
what to do.
we don't know.
You know?
We don't know if it.
Maybe we can.
this-
I don't
you
know.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
we
doubt
can't.
if you'll ever do that.
But
Yeah.
what we can continue to do is, and I know this sounds maybe a little corny, but love them, enjoy them, you know, because we seriously get it right back. We, honest to God, we do. You're walking down the hallway and you know, and it's just, it's lovely. It really is. And unless you've ever really been in a nursing home, it is truly a lovely thing.
Back in the day, remember, everybody that got pregnant got a blanket, because some little lady would be making
Yes, when I got
baby
married.
blankets.
They.
Yep, you would get,
Yeah.
I started working here before I took my boards, and there was 3 nurses out of my same class. Of course, we've retired. I still come back in, but everybody else retired. But I can remember, back then when you passed nursing school and then you had to go take your boards, this was before computers, you know, and cell phones on. So you went to Harrisburg and you wrote everything out, you took your test. Well, it could take anywhere from a month to 3 months till you got a letter in the mail telling you passed or not. So as everybody was passing, we come in like, oh, I got the letter today, I finally passed my boards. Somebody was getting flowers that day. The ladies will go out and pick you a bunch of flowers and, you know, bring it in. Oh, congratulations, Carol, we're so proud of you, you know, here. Yeah, it was just little
Well,
stuff like
I
that.
know, and this is sort of not maybe an appropriate story, but it's a funny story, and it's probably this day and age, it's probably gonna sound terrible. Gosh, I'm probably I should ask for forgiveness before I tell you this, but we had a Wild West day here one day, and the activity department, we all dressed up, because I was in activities for a few years. We all dressed up in Wild West outfits, and we were in the main dining room, and there was a gunfight. And so some of the outlaws came in, and we were hiding behind residents, and we had toy guns, and we were all shooting each other, and the residents were involved with it as well. We gave them to, and I know that sounds really bad now to say this type of thing with the world we live in, and now we would be closed down. But it was fun. The residents absolutely loved it. We had cowboy hats on them and scarves, and
Do you
we
remember
were
you
hiding
guys
behind
used to
each
do
other, and it was
the
fun.
the
We had
fairs
fun.
every year, remember?
The fairs were,
It was
the
like 3
carnivals
days.
were
Yeah, they
lovely
had
out
carnivals,
there.
the activities, and like all these guys helped, and that's another thing too. When I started, you didn't have a lot of male employees, so we're always calling, Blaine, or even his father and stuff. If you need help, somebody, God forbid, but somebody fell or something, and you need help, it was a true team. It was not, well, that's not my job, or, that's not my
Nobody was
floor,
done until
or that's
everybody
not-
was done.
Yeah, right.
At the end of the day.
Right.
Seriously.
I mean, you would be working and you would get a phone call from a nurse on another floor. Are you done with your meds yet? Nope, okay. She'd come over to help. We didn't have to follow, like, call for permission and call a supervisor and call this, you know what I mean?
It's just
It
a
was a
different
home.
time.
It's a different time,
It
just a
really
different
is.
time.
I mean, you can't have Wild West days anymore.
Well, it kind of makes you afraid, because there's always talk, isn't there, of whether the county home will continue to exist, or whether it's going to be contracted out, or whether it's going to be sold.
Mhm.
But what you all have described as not only what's happened in the past, but by and large, this is still the attitude of many people who still work here. And the fact that I was sitting down the night that we celebrated our first anniversary of the rehab unit, and I was sitting down and I learned something from one of our county commissioners. And he was here and he was so proud of everything going on, and then we had some hors d'oeuvres, and he said, Tim, I don't know if you knew this, you're new around here, but this home does not cost the county 1 penny.
Mm-mm.
And that was a surprise to me,
Yeah,
because
we're so-
all the arguments I had heard is that we can't afford to keep it open.
And they keep saying that for
Well,
whatever reason.
I think
but
that's,
I
that
don't
was the
know.
push with the rehab unit, and again, I can't say anything about the commissioners, I can't think anything about the people that run here. It's the time of day, it's the time of year, it's the insurances. What your insurance paid for you 5 years ago doesn't pay now. And that was the big push to get to rehab, because we do get reimbursed more for that. Some of the older girls and guys that work here were really offended by that initially, because they were like, oh yeah, it's all about the money now, it's all about the money. Well, yeah, it is, because if we don't get that reimbursement, we can't take care of the little 90-year-old lady that has lived here for so long and hopefully has some more time to live with us. It is about the money, it is, and that's,
But back then it
that's-
wasn't.
yeah, it wasn't about the money then. When I first started working here for years, I had no idea what it cost to live here. I had no idea what it cost for me to open that bottle of Tylenol. Because I didn't have to worry about it. We had people in the office that took care of that. The bills were paid. I had nothing to do with it. For the most part, I still don't. I have to rely on them. But it was until things started changing, as far as the insurances and Medicares and all that, when the economy went south, that's when we started hearing more about it. And I guess in one aspect, it was kind of good for me to know that, but before that, I never worried about it. I didn't have to worry about it. There was somebody else. All I had to do was take care of my friends that lived here. That's all I had to do, and that was a great job.
Well, that's the impressive part, is just to watch you from a chaplain's perspective, because I'm all about caring for people, caring for the staff, make sure we treating our staff well, make sure we treat our residents well. But, yeah, things have fiscally had to get tighter. But again, I've been so impressed with the spirit of community that we've been talking about, that even though things have clamped down, got tighter, it's still, so many of the folks here still go that second mile, still strive to take care of people. Yeah, we gotta pay the bills, but there's a considerable amount of leeway between paying the bills and us taking care of each other. And that's what I like.
Absolutely.
I had
That's
somebody
what I
from
like
the
to see.
courthouse ask me, I retired 10 years ago.
Okay.
And officially retired 10 years ago. And I work PRN now. Unfortunately, I don't work the floors anymore because I just don't have the physical ability to keep up like all the younger kids do. So I do a lot of training. And I had somebody at the courthouse ask me one time, why do you still come in and train after all these years? Haven't you had enough? You want to know the real reason? The real reason I do it is, number one, I miss the people I worked with, I miss the resident. But the second reason, which is more selfish, is someday I'm going to live here. And I want people to take care of me the way I was taught by the older nurses before me to take care of the people here. And that's, you know, it's very selfish when you think about it, but that's the truth.
It talks to what
That's
we're
the
about,
truth.
what we want to be about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a lovely place for me. I feel like I was raised here. I started here at the age of 20.
Mhm.
I'm 53 now. I'm still going, and then
Yeah, I was
God,
19 and I'm 63.
I feel like I was raised here. Blaine, you
Mhm.
were.
Blaine
and,
was.
I was.
and literally he was.
Literally.
And I blink and it's 33 years later, and it's amazing. But I am so glad that I was on this ride. I really am.
And there is still some nurses out there that have been here like us. You know, Tammy's over in first. We have Juanita, who started as a CNA and you know, now she's a secretary. I mean, there is still other people.
Oh,
Cindy's
absolutely.
been here for years. Yes, there is still, but there's not. They're getting fewer and fewer.
Oh, we're all getting older.
Right, but that's
You
what I'm
know,
saying.
but,
The younger working generation, and I don't think it's just here. I think it's
Oh,
everywhere.
no, it's the age.
We're going to lose that longevity, and that's going to hurt places like the county home. I think it will.
And God forbid if the place is ever sold, and I hope it's not, but if it would be sold, I'm being sold with it. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not giving up. I'm gonna keep going, and there's too much to be done here still, and you know, I hope that we keep it. I hope that it stays Claremont, regardless of who owns it. I just hope it stays Claremont, and I hope
Mhm.
that it stays.
I don't want it
The
to. I
values
don't
of
want
it.
it to see it to be like a for-profit. I don't want to see that.
We need the residents to know when they come through those doors that they're home.
Mhm.
And that's very important to a lot of us. And so, you know.
One of the things that I was wondering when you were speaking, it seems like the staff has a very close connection with the people who live here. And I'm wondering, so you must have heard stories of them growing up, and
Mhm.
do you have a sense of, you know, sort of on aggregate what people value in the community that are residents here, Claremont and any place else, or?
In the early days, it was a lot of respect. They valued respect. You didn't tarnish your family name.
Okay.
You know, you continued. There was a lot of things handed down. A lot like if your dad was a farmer, you were a farmer. If your dad worked at one of the factories, you worked at one of those factories. When I first started, there was a lot of that. You didn't, you know, it was, Dad was worked at Maslin's, that's where, you know, I went to work. There was none of this that, I thought maybe I might go to college and do this. So probably the first 10, 15, 20 years, you saw that. And then after that, you started hearing, I went to the Carlisle Industrial School, or I went to, different places, different nursing schools and stuff like that. And then, probably about the last 20 years or 25 years, we're getting more residents in with college educations and stuff. But when I first worked it was a lot of rural jobs, a lot of, not that they weren't unskilled, a lot of them were, alignment.
They were just
and
different. They
yeah,
were just
a
different
different era.
but they were differently. They were looked at differently by the society. I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
they were.
And again,
they were
we were the
different.
poorhouse, remember
Uh-huh.
that too,
We were.
so-
This is where people came that
Yeah.
their families. I don't know if they wanted to hide them away or just be done with them. But interestingly enough, and I may have had one or two, but interestingly enough, they never talked poorly about their families.
Never.
You know, they may have had horrible lives and bringing ups and you know, growing up and stuff, but I don't remember them really ever talking terrible about their families. You know, it was just a different time back then, you know, and as Blaine and Carol and some of them would break your heart. You know, you look at them. There was one lady that lived here that was taken, Blaine. Did you drive her to the hospital to give birth?
My dad did.
And then
Katie
the
Reynolds.
baby was taken from her,
From
and she
her.
came right back here to live.
Right.
And the only thing that was wrong with her, she was going to get married. Her boyfriend was killed on a train accident. He was a railroad man, and he was killed in a railroad accident. And she was going to get married, and the only reason why she had some, she couldn't read or write, but she could have learned. She just didn't. They never gave her the opportunity to learn, and this is where she died. She lived her entire life, probably 40 years?
Well, I think she was 16 or 17 when she came in here.
You
Right.
know, and she died here at the age of
About
80. Yeah, she lived her entire life here, never given the opportunity. And that's one who worked at the kitchen and did stuff later on. She delivered mail for us. Very, very sad story. Just not given the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's what we ended up getting here. And this was their home, and we were gonna make sure that they knew it.
This was a
And
safe place to fall for those type of people. Like I said, that was before we had, you know, CPART and Office of Aging and you know, the mental health, you know, agencies and stuff like that. That's before all that. So.
Before HIPAA and before
Right,
the state
before
says,
HIPAA.
oh, you can't do this,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
and you can't
right.
do that, and there's good things about HIPAA. I'm not saying there isn't, but
It limits you. Things like that really
No.
limit you now. Where before we could just about, you know, if you had good intentions, that was good enough. You know, you could do what, you know.
I mean, we used to go to the ice capades and to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Bertie would take them to the beach in the back of in the station wagon, pack
Yep.
them and take them to the daggone beach.
For a weekend,
You know, for a
not
weekend.
just for an hour or two.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, we did all kinds of stuff.
And some of those some of those folks she took had never seen the ocean, you know. So
I thought you were gonna say never came back.
No, they didn't. They had never
saw
seen
them
the
again.
ocean, you know.
Needed the bed.
Yeah, it was.
it's just, and it's different for all nursing homes. It's just not us. But maybe it was different for us. A lot different for us because we're the poorhouse, and they work here, and they came here because there was nowhere else to go, and the other homes in the area were more. I want to say upscaled with their resident. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't even know back then what other nursing
because
homes
I've never
were.
worked in another nursing home.
Yeah, I don't know, but I can't imagine that there was more than one poorhouse in the area, you know, and
right.
we were it.
Right.
So the not the clientele, but the residents that we had living here were different than possibly living at a private sector home, maybe Church of God or somewhere like that. That's a beautiful home. And and you had asked how we ever could get that home feeling back. I'm hoping that we're doing as best as we can with what we're given.
I don't think we'll ever
really
get
do.
it back. I don't think we can get it back.
And we're not, but we can learn how to do it new, and I'm hoping that we're doing that. But our hands are really tied with things, and you know that, Tim. There's just certain things that we cannot do anymore, and except give them a hug, you know. And there are residents that were here and maybe still are here that we're it for them. You know, their children, their spouses have died, their children are away or busy doing their own thing, and this is it. They have us, and we will make sure that they know that they have us.
I just hope beyond us there's somebody else
Well,
that
that's
can
what I'm
pick it
hopeful
up.
too, because
you know?
I'm with you. I'm going to be here someday, you know. And it would be nice to know that there's another Carol in the hallway there, or another Blaine, or Mary Ann, or Tim. You know, it'd be lovely to know that. Who knows? Who knows?
Thank you.
We done?
Blaine, do you have
Yeah.
anything? Gosh, you've been so,
Oh,
you haven't gotten the word in edgewise over
I
Carol and I,
know,
sorry.
yeah.
Some things never change, huh, Blaine?
No, I just have to say that I enjoyed, my father was retired 42 years, and I thought he was crazy to stay that many years at one job, and then I retired at 43. Now, I didn't work exactly here all them
Right.
years. I did move into maintenance after they closed the farming up, so
Yep.
I was more
Do
into the
you re-
maintenance of the county, mowing grass
Yeah.
and plowing snow and
Blaine
working
used
on
to drive
vehicles, and
The summer fair float every year
Uh-huh.
for us,
so.
every, you know.
Yeah, we
But
used to put
it
a
was
float
a
in.
pleasure seeing the residents, how they enjoyed working on the farm, and I had to teach them how to plant plants and all that, so I got a reward.
You had a few guys too through that, not just one or two. I mean, that was like a
Well.
coveted position, you know, to get to work done. And I can remember when I started, the apartment was still up front too. They had,
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
apartment,
Yeah,
I
there
don't
was-
think your
It was like a,
Well, they lived there.
parents were still there
Bathroom,
then in the
shower.
seven, yeah.
Well, they lived there
Yeah,
before,
I
but
can remember
then,
the apartment was up there.
when Mrs. Gibler took over, she didn't move
Mhm.
in.
Mhm.
They had an apartment there, so
and that
he
was
retired.
Diane Meyer's mom, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
Diane Myers
Phyllis
retired
Dillard.
here a few
Mhm.
years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Diane worked in like the office areas, the business office and stuff. Her mom took over as administrator after your dad, or was it?
Yes.
Yeah, Mrs. Gibler was.
yeah.
And that's when I came, right as Mr. Shatto was leaving, Mrs. Gibler was taking over back then.
80 years of contributions for the Shatto family.
Shatto family,
Hard to believe.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but to me, they were the stable force for the county home, I think.
Well.
That was the fact that they lived here and they were so involved, God love them, they probably never really had any time off. But, you know, if you
No.
needed something, all you had to do was call, you know?
Knock on the door,
At
window.
night.
Well, yeah,
At night,
yeah,
at
yeah,
night, at
yeah.
night and the
Pound on the wall.
weekends. At
Yeah,
night
I
and
know.
weekend.
Yeah, it didn't matter, but that, we had, I think we were, like I said, I never worked in another nursing home, so I really can't tell you. But I know that for us was, maybe not for them, but for us, that was such a safe place. That was, if there's anything wrong, who you call? Well, what do you mean who you call? You call Mr. Shatto, you know, and because you knew you could call, you know, it didn't matter. It made it easier for us, so.
Okay, can't think of anything else.
Thank you
Well,
so
you've all
much.
done wonderfully. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow, I'd like to make a movie out of
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
You can edit out my Wild West story if you need to
Everybody-
be politically correct.
Everybody always says that works here, oh, I could write a book.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh, one year Kathy Sourbeer, we had a Thanksgiving thing in the old chapel up front where the PT department is now. And she brought in a turkey from home and we colored it with like food, make it brown to look done. And we reused it for 3 days. She took it home and cooked it and ate it then.
Oh, my Lord.
Well, you remember old Kathy.
Yeah,
would
she
eat
was just in
anything.
here last week. She still does the flower arrangements
Yes.
in the dining room.
Mhm.
She comes in, Kathy Sauerbeer, she worked here
I did not know.
She
she
was
that.
our
has to be,
activity
she's in her
department.
late eighties.
Oh my
Say,
gosh,
she
yes.
gotta
She
be.
has
Yeah,
to be.
and
Yes,
she
yes.
comes, she was activities but I just ran into her last week. It was either Thursday or Friday was when I worked. It was Thursday. Actually, it was Thursday. I ran into her Thursday there. And I said, what are you doing here? Because I didn't know, and I'm not being disrespectful, I didn't know she was living here. Because, you know, she was just she said, oh, I come in to do the flowers, you know, and then she said, I do the artificial floral arrangements in the dining room. So, yeah,
Wow.
they always come back.
Yeah, we all could write a book around this place. We honestly could. I don't know if anybody would ever buy it, but.
They wouldn't believe it. So,
All
okay, well, thank
Thank you for
you.
your